Hey, and good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing
Morning.
today?
Good.
Great.
Good.
So,
Um,
thank you for joining us for our stream today. We're doing one on KPIs. We have a great guide out there that we'll show in a second, where you can download it. It's a KPI guide for IT. But before we get started, I just want to say thanks to everyone who watches and views and comments on our streams and our social. And we're trying to get this message out there. So it's been a really great journey and just who we are. We're IT managed service provider here in New York. I'm here from our New York office. I'm very excited about that today. And so anyway, I'm just gonna before we get started on our KPI talk, I'm gonna hand it over to Justin and the download.
Good morning. So this week, start with a reminder for everyone that the cloud is essentially just somebody else's computer. And I learn a little bit about what I mean about that. Last week, there was a fire at a data center for a cloud provider, OVH. They're a major cloud provider in mostly the European market. They focus on a lot of companies that want to keep their data within the EU. And this fire in one of their data centers resulted in shutting down uh, the adjacent data centers that were there as well, not just the building itself that was affected. And they're looking at potentially outages that last until sometime next week before all of their services are brought back up online. And this incident really highlighted a this idea, at least for me, that the cloud really is somebody else's computer, and just putting data and putting services in the cloud isn't always enough to make sure that you have, that it's protected and that you have a fail-proof system. You
Right.
have to take into account how that data is stored and how to engineer those systems to balance out the risk of data loss. One example of this was see the game. It's like a first-person horror survival game called Rust. They lost a bunch of their customer data. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I'm sure that they took that into account as an quote unquote acceptable loss because their systems are still up and running, but some of the server data is gone. But that's part of figuring out how you want to protect your data in the cloud. So for I'd say software as a service applications, we're on like 365 or Google or Dropbox or those sorts of things. You generally are protected against this type of issue where a single data center is affected, but you still want to have some kind of protection against data loss. We work with a number of cloud to cloud backup providers, or ensuring that you have cloud to local or even replication between different services, just as a way to make sure that the data that you've put in those cloud services is protected should something happen to the account, to that service. Similarly, I'd say for your website hosting, you do want to make sure that you have local copies of the data, local copies of your design files of all the pieces that go into it, but also want to make sure that your hosting provider builds in some type of backup service so that you have that available, or
Right.
finding another backup service for that. I mean, the hosting provider goes offline and you have your backup files. It's not instant, but you can restore yourself back to something else.
Just a note here, just as a point out for
Hmm.
so many businesses today, obviously with how people are communicating with their clients, how people are driving new business in this kind of virtual world that we're living in. That website now has become what was kind of like a business card website in the past, may now become a critical piece of
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
Yeah.
strategy or your communication system to your clients. And it's way more important than just, hey, I have a website, no one really goes to it. That kind of mindset. It's truly like a piece of your critical infrastructure. So sorry to interrupt, Justin.
No,
I just want
that's
I just want to call it out. It's just like
right on.
we see it all the time. So
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That it went from I've got a website up on this, small $10 a month hosting just to have a website up so that people can find my phone number, to my website has multiple databases driving web-based applications, and the backup and recovery of those two types of sites are vastly different. So
Correct. Yeah.
that's when you want to work with your, your DevOps team to make sure that wherever those things are hosted, there is some type of backup available to it. Again, just being, well, it's in the cloud, not necessarily enough. The that does lead into the more complicated services like platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. And this is where you're looking at things like AWS and Azure and Google Cloud Compute. And for those types of services, things that you've built there, your tolerance to downtime and data loss overall really is going to drive the decisions for engineering. So, what I mean by this, you get the option when you are, designing these things, to make use of multiple regions, multiple data centers. And if you, depending on how you build that service, well, great example, you run a let's say you're running a server in Azure, just a basic Windows server, and you run the built-in Azure backup on it. By default, that does what's called a uh, geographic redundant backup. So it stores your data in 3 different locations. You could reduce cost by having it only store local. But in that case, let's say you were in the data center that caught fire, the backup is local to that, that data's gone. Depending on what that data is, whether or not you need to be able to restore it, how bad it is to completely lose it, that may be sufficient for you. And that's more of a business decision necessarily than just an engineering decision. And again, going back to the game data, I'm sure that the engineers for that system decided that, yeah, the cost of saving, these players save games, yeah, it would suck if we lose them, but it's too expensive to do that and keep our cost at whatever they need to keep it at and run all of that. So you do need to keep those pieces in mind. Doing backup, doing things like building your applications to use multiple regions, multiple data centers, and if one of them goes offline, your application, your website may not go down, it may be degraded, but things can continue to run. And again, this is a question of, are you using your website as a digital business card, or are you using your website as something that is directly driving your revenue? If Amazon's website goes down, that's a way bigger deal than if, a website that you use to collect leads or give out your phone number is down. It,
Right.
directly impacts. So there's more of a budget involved in keeping that online.
Mhm.
And I mean, all of this, really what it ties back to is having a proper IT strategy to figure out uh, what the acceptable downtime is, what the acceptable, what the cost is for those things, and balancing out and making a business decision on the risk, how much risk you're willing to accept versus how much you're willing to pay for that. And the you know, each case for each business, that's going to be, your own
Right.
process to figure out. And we certainly are here to help our customers and help you guys if you have questions on what the pros and cons of different options are. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a business decision to figure out what you're going to do with it and how you're
Uh,
going to build it, as long as you keep in mind that being in the cloud, just because it's in the cloud, doesn't mean it's ironclad bulletproof. There's still room for failure and room to build in protections.
100%. That is absolutely correct. I mean, just that risk analysis. Look at kind of like, once again, tabletop your business
Mhm.
a bit, internally with your folks, and honestly, it's such a great exercise you do, and then to say, hey, what changed annually, that sort of thing,
Mhm.
and it's super useful. If anyone has any questions how to do it, submit it to us. I love,
Yeah, we
I
love
love
doing it. We're
love doing it. It's one of my favorite activities.
one of our clients this week asked us for that for a project we are proposing to them, and you'd think, like, oh no, they're asking for more info. No, it was like, this is great. Yes, absolutely, we'll be happy to run through all of this with you
100%.
because it's good information to have and it's fun. I like doing
Is
it.
it
So.
is well, I think for us, I know for myself, I mean, and Justin and I, we do this all the time. We work together, and it's very much that, really, it's not just doing the IT function, which we like doing as well, but really definitely directly impacting the business's
Mhm.
operations in a way that the business owner can make some really good decisions, and the leadership can make some really great decisions on
Mhm.
their business. So I'm going to use that as a great segue into KPIs. So,
Yeah.
Hey.
hey, I like that.
Very
All
good.
right. So, I'm looking at some of our documentation here, and the Metrics was a terrible movie. I think Matrix is what we were trying to say here. I disagree with Marianne. We talked about this earlier. Matrix, the first Matrix is a spectacular movie. The
Thank you.
sequels, not so much. So,
Yeah.
so
Start waiting.
absolutely. So,
Depends on their KPIs, though. They made money, so.
thank,
That's
thank you, Matt.
true. Mhm.
So anyway, so what is a metric? What is a KPI? What are these things? They're the same thing, right? They're just to kind of put some boundaries around it. They're figures and data. They're objective values that represent a business actions, abilities, and quality of the products and services offered to their customers. They're
Mhm.
the internal guideposts. So some of the things that are really important is that they need to be actionable, they need to be real. Don't be vanity things. Like we
Mhm.
did this many widget things, or this. You hear a lot of that especially in the kind of like startup SaaS business in arena, where people talk about number of users, downloads, and then you're like, well, how many people are paying for it? And there's
Yeah.
crickets. So
Yeah.
that's an important thing. And really, you want to be unbiased, and you really want to see where your blind spots are, and maybe have an outside person come look at it. There's so many different ways to interpret it, and this topic spurred a ton of conversation for
Mhm.
us
Yeah.
internally, and um, we're an IT service provider, right? We live in metrics. They're a really critical part of our business. Each one of us follow a series. Here on this call, we have our own metrics that we follow as part of our business
Right.
operations.
Mhm.
But we also, just to help our customers and our and just people out in the field here, we created this IT key performance indicator guide. Things that we found were just super important as a small business, just to understand. Um, where your IT is, how to kind of give it some objectivity, and just that work with it, so that it's not just this kind of gut check expense kind of thing. And
Mhm.
going back to even our earlier conversation about the disaster recovery or the cloud services, that's the kind of thing that we think is like so critical and can be a massive game changer for a business. So
Mhm.
with that, I'm going to go to the next phase of our conversation about NorthStar Metric, which I don't know if you guys have, we did a bunch of conversation on it. And, Justin, why don't you kind of go through this with us a little bit, just as the NorthStar Metric?
Yeah. So, I mean, really saying that metrics, they can be representative of almost everything, and it's can make it tough to figure out which ones are going to provide you with actual actionable insights.
Mhm.
And so actually, so, I forget, there's a link, if we can throw up here too, Matt, just uh, growth with sorry, I can't even
Word.
read what that is. But the idea basically this great yeah, there we go.
It's like,
Matt,
yeah.
get it
You
up.
got it.
So there's a good link to get up here to do a reading about NorthStar Metrics. But yeah, the idea is that yeah, we want to have stuff that can really figure out what something that you're using as your guiding post for your long-term growth, for your
Mhm.
long-term strategy, not just something that is like George said, not a vanity metric, not something that's
Mhm.
like
Mm.
we had 20,000 people look at our website, like, okay, but how does that impact the business goals? How does that impact, there we go. Yep.
Thanks,
That
Matt.
how does that impact where we're taking the business? How does that impact our value? How does
Right.
that demonstrate our value? You really want to have that I mean, the idea of Northstar, that piece that you are driving towards, that you're using to orient yourself towards the direction you want to take your business in. And
Mhm.
determining that North Star metric, that in itself is a process that you
Mhm.
run
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
That's what we found. I mean, we
Yeah.
found it internally. Like the conversation we had, like, what is our North Star metric?
Mhm.
We have tons of metrics, but what's
Mhm.
the one thing that transcends the entire organization operation, right? And
Mhm.
that's a really complex thing, and it's complex, but it has to be distilled into a simple thing you can say and report
Mhm.
easily, right?
Yeah, and it's gonna take a lot of different people from different departments
Yes. Yeah.
weighing in.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we talked about before was that it's also gotta be important for the entire business. If it's your
Mhm.
North Star, not just you know, your one-time metric, it's
Mhm.
gotta be important for
Right.
every single department. So, yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's
So yeah,
alright.
and every department may have their own other metrics that they're using to help
Yes.
drive them towards that. So, you could think of it like if you are, you know, driving a steamship, using the using your North Star as your compass to where you're going, the engine room might be using a metric of how much coal they could shovel into the boiler, but
Mhm.
that's only so good. That's only as good as it is to drive the whole ship in the same direction. And
Right.
if they shovel a ton of coal, but it's not moving them in the right direction, okay, that's something else is going on, and look at other metrics, other pieces to tie together to get that whole big, forward facing, this is where we want things to go.
Right.
Mhm.
It really helps tie together the organization in a way that just if we're using that coal metric, and I think that what happens is people can't, and I'm gonna say I'm probably way guilty of this, is you focus on things that seem really important at the moment, but
Mhm.
they may not be in the grand scope of things, right?
Yeah.
And when you pull back the lens, all of a sudden you're like, man, I was so focused on, like, in our business, like ticket time resolution.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Man, flogging the service team to get that done, but maybe that's not the right metric that matters to both the customer and to the end result, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that's a really hard
Mhm.
thing. So, that's, and Justin, you and I talk about this probably weekly.
Yeah, so
Not
even that, like, to
being
Yeah.
dissect that a little bit more, when we're using ticket metrics, it's useful information. It's information we need, but it can't be the driving factor on it, for the simple fact that the ticket metrics may not show the full picture. Like, if we use the metric of we want to have one touch resolution on all of our
Mhm.
tickets, so that every ticket that comes in gets closed by the first person that opens it right away, that's a good metric to measure. But if we use that as our North Star, that doesn't necessarily drive us where we want to be, because what that does is you could have a situation where there's lots of things that break all the time at our clients that are very easy to fix.
Mhm.
And we don't want that. We want them to not break at all. So
Mhm.
that
correct.
metric isn't a great North Star metric, because it doesn't address that piece of it. So then it's okay, well, let's look at what something that's what do we want? What's our, define our goal, define what we want. And that's, for us, but for, there's different businesses, different business models have different things
Correct.
that may go with it. I know a great one, Spotify,
Mhm.
is time spent listening.
Mhm.
Right.
How
Humor.
much time do people spend listening to the service, and all the other pieces of, do we have, enough content? Are the algorithms working? All those other pieces
Mhm.
roll back up into the goal of getting people to listen to Spotify more often than not.
Mhm.
Right.
That's,
And that also one thing to is, like, it's beneficial to the customer as well.
Mhm.
If they, are listening more, they're getting the benefit of your service and they're seeing the value in it. So I
Mhm.
think that's also really important.
That's it, yeah.
Exactly. And Matt makes a good point in our chat here. Is like in that engine, it's minutes listened to is both the people who subscriber and the free with ad
Yeah.
subscriber, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the non-paying subscriber person, and that applies to all customers, right? So, like, and I think a lot of folks tend to focus on sales metrics as the only metric, but it may not be the right one for your business.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One here is a hotel night number of nights booked, but
Mhm.
that's such an abject metric that doesn't necessarily show revenue, because in many hotels you'll have X number of their goal is to keep the hotel full and humming
Mhm.
along and operating, because
Mhm.
an unfilled hotel is, it's like an unfilled, I'm saying probably airlines, right? Unfilled
Yeah. Yeah.
hotels or not unfilled airlines seats, but you're still paying for the fuel, right? The fuel
Yeah.
doesn't,
Mhm.
the
The
airline
biggest part
is
of
gonna,
the
Yeah.
cost is still happening. So
right,
yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. So you
Yeah.
want it, so if you really think about it, it should be, the hotel and that sort of thing. And one, the other one is the retail. Some of the retail, these retail e-commerce sites is number of items in the cart.
Right.
That may be
Mhm.
the thing you're doing, like, you're trying to maximize
Hmm.
your the spend or the day that they're the shopping experience.
Yeah,
So
I remember from days of working, at retail, the metrics that we would track for our sales, and one of them was the average number of items in a sale. And
Right.
the idea was that, they wanted to see that, people were buying more than one. Basically, they were buying more than one thing. That somebody wasn't
Mhm.
right,
coming in buying one thing. It's like, well, why didn't they also buy candy, or why didn't they also
Mhm.
buy a second
correct.
DVD or something like that? And that's part of the metrics to drive that, to say, like, yeah, if we could drive that number up, we will have to do lots of other things to drive that number up. But if we drive that number up, that is an indicator of the health of the business and the direction they wanted it to go in.
Right, exactly. I mean, so some of the things that I think just kind of walking through it is like they should lead the revenue. I mean, it is important. I mean, look, at the end
Hmm.
of the day, revenue is how a company is the lifeblood of a company. So
Yeah.
not to ignore that, but
Yeah.
it shouldn't be the only. It shouldn't be the metric per se. Um, and then it should reflect customer value. Like it
Hmm.
should feel that the customer gets something out of this metric. Like in that sort of thing. It should measure progress, and the last thing, it should overall in the experience with the customer and for the staff and for everybody involved in the kind of like channel here. And the other part has to be time based. You can't
Hmm.
have this open ended permanent thing where it's like there's a like lifetime customers. Like that doesn't mean anything. Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
is it you could
McDonald's over 1 trillion served. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
great.
yeah.
That doesn't
That's
mean
only
anything.
ever it's never gonna go down. That's only ever gonna go up.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
But yeah, I think if you apply those 4 pieces to one of the examples, like to Spotify time listening, I mean, you could see how it encapsulates all of those lead to
Right.
revenue. And said, yeah, it does, because either it's the ad revenue that they're getting, or it's a subscriber. If a subscriber isn't using the service, there's a chance they're going to cancel
Learn to
their
cancel.
subscription. So
Yeah.
that reflect customer value. Yeah, again, they're using the service. That means that they're getting some from it. Either they're paying direct or they're not, but they're getting the value from it. And measuring progress, it can, because you can see an increase or a decrease in the amount of listening that's being done, and time bound. And it's like, yeah, this, if we're doing it every month, then that resets every month. It's how did we
Mhm.
do this month versus
Correct.
last month? How did we do
Mhm.
this quarter versus last quarter?
Mhm.
Yep. It's a really critical. And this is great. And we've been for us, this has opened up I wouldn't say opened a can of worms for us, but it became like a conversation. And
Mhm.
for us, we never really had this as a value. Just to be blunt, we never had this kind of open NorthStar metric, and it's something that's inspired us to get started. One of the metrics that we follow really closely here is a very customer service focused metric, which
Mhm.
is our number of QBRs delivered, our quarterly business reviews. Not to use acronyms, but as that's a bad thing we do in our industry. But really, we really the idea here is we meet every month, every quarter with every customer,
Mhm.
because I think that's such an important
Mhm.
factor in terms of our ability to understand what's happening in their business and
Mhm.
aligning our technology to
Mhm.
their business needs, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And getting the end result out of them. So,
Mhm.
our goal here is to get 100% every quarter of every customer. And and we had to make a lot of changes internally to meet that goal in terms of like having good content. I mean, if the meeting just stinks, no one wants to go,
Yeah.
right? That's
Sure.
a critical part of it. I think obviously doing it through video chat made it much more accessible.
Accessible. Yeah.
Correct.
Scheduling
Mhm.
is a lot easier. Yeah.
Scheduling, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, anyway, as I say, I'm really excited about it. I think this North Star thing has kind of got me thinking, and like all things,
Mhm.
we teach and we learn at the same time here, and I think it's such a critical thing. So, it's really cool. But it
Yeah.
was, and how it ties back into your performance automation is other thing about KPIs, just to put a little cap on it, is that if the KPIs aren't easy to figure out and track, you won't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a critical piece of any
Yeah.
automation, and to kind of bring it back and into the hold here. So,
Yeah.
anyway, it sounds great. You guys have anything else for today? This is such a rich topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a
Really
ton.
Yeah. I mean, we're
interesting.
just hitting the tip of the iceberg on KPIs
Seriously.
and
Yeah.
So
yeah.
awesome. So all right, well, we'll close it out for today. It's such a great, it was an awesome topic. Ton of information. Please check out the IT KPI guide that we put together. We think
Mhm.
that it has a lot of great places. This, even if it just sparks your conversation internally and get you some ideas of what to look for in your IT organization. That's super useful. And if anyone wants to do a risk tabletop with us, just hit us up on our website and there are
Mhm.
questions. I gladly talk to anyone about it. It's a topic I'm really super passionate about, because I think that um, anyone who doesn't take this seriously is so, it's, you're just so exposed, and we're
Yeah.
so reliant on these systems now more than we ever been. I mean, this to go back to what Justin said earlier about that client that we're talking about. They require these systems to be working, and they want to make sure that, and they want to work through all the possibilities before they make a really massive choice of how they're going to run their business, and that's
Mhm.
really smart. It's hard,
Yeah.
but
And I think that's, yeah,
yeah,
what scares people off from it too, is that there's always going to be something more that you can do, and there's
of
always going to
course,
be more money that you can spend, but that's not the goal. The goal is to
Yeah.
figure out what your tolerances are and be aware of the risk and be aware of where the line is,
Mhm.
and to find the place that you are comfortable operating from, as
right,
opposed to just having the blinders on and saying it's all fine,
yeah,
everything's fine,
it's
until
gonna be
it's
great.
not.
Until it's really
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
way better to know what the risks are and accept them than just, you know, hope for the best.
Yeah.
100%, 100%. So I
Absolutely.
know we're running out of time.
No.
So anyway, please check us out on thevaliantway.com. Ton of content on there. There's some great videos on our YouTube channel. Marianne has done some unbelievable content there around just
Mhm.
training and some topics, and learn new stuff that you can take away and actually do the first time you see it. You can literally useful things. We're on LinkedIn, social, Facebook, all the usual places. And our next stream, I'm really excited. We're talking about third-party integrations, which is how
Mm.
you actually make these kind of cloud services and all these other things kind of do the things you want it to do, right? Like you have to be able to integrate it all together and make it super useful, and kind of build out your automation and KPIs, and then you can do the things you want to do, like serve, do a better job for your customer, have
Mhm.
that efficiencies, and just kind of enjoy things better, feel safe.
Yeah.
So awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thanks a lot for today. I appreciate it, and I'll
Thank you,
looking
guys.
forward to next week. And have a great week. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
bye, everybody.
Hi,
All right,
everyone.
bye.
Great.
Thanks.